Welcome back to Cracked with Siobhan Aris, Season 3. It's been 5 months since our last episode of Season 2, which is quite a break. In that time, my family has moved to Austin, Texas, and slowly but surely we're getting settled into our new life here. I've almost finished setting up my studio, and I'm currently in the beginning stages for a few commissions, which is super exciting. The last 3 of those months, I've been working on putting together these episodes starting this week for Season 3. So in the past seasons, I did it a little differently. I would record and release my interviews in chronological order and would still be working on the tail end of the season when the first half was already out, if that makes sense. This time I found a much more efficient workflow with recording them all, editing them all, and now I'll release them to you once a week. The only con of doing it that way is that the break was a little longer between seasons than I had originally planned for and maybe also alluded to. So thank you for your patience. Another thing that's really cool this year and a little different is that almost every single artist will be gifting something to the Cracked Patreon page members. We'll have drawings for original pieces, lots of original pieces actually, discount codes, playlists, original patterns, and some other really cool surprises along the way. If you want to join in on that fun, you can. You can become a member at patreon.com/Runa Glassworks, or you can just go to patreon.com and you can do a search for the podcast as well. There are tiers of membership. They start as low as $5 a month. They go up to $20 a month. But even at the lowest tier, you are automatically entered into drawings. You get access to the episodes 24 hours early, you get a podcast shout out, and a sticker pack. Now, if supporting Cracked monetarily is not an option for you right now, I totally understand. But another really beneficial way you can let me know that you appreciate this podcast, you appreciate the information being shared each week, is by subscribing, liking, giving a thumbs up, whatever the option is, wherever you're listening, and to leave a positive review. That review means so much. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, to kick this season off, I'm joined by Derek Hunt. He does it all. Not only reputable and respected conservation work, but also new, really beautiful and really thoughtful glasswork for public buildings, so schools, theaters, restaurants, libraries, and hospitals. His work can be seen throughout the United Kingdom and beyond. He's also one of the warmest people I've had the honor of interviewing, and another really good example of someone who is impressively generous with his knowledge of all things glass. As you'll hear him explain in our chat today, like many, the pandemic forced him to expand professionally, and for him, that meant taking on the challenge of making quality content for his social media channels, especially YouTube. On his YouTube channel, he shares free online tutorials, inspirational videos, and artist interviews. With some editing magic done by Derek, this interview will also be viewable on Derek's as well as my YouTube channel, and a link to watch that is in the episode's show notes. Support for this episode comes from the Stained Glass Association of America, the steward of one of the oldest continuously published journals in the country, the Stained Glass Quarterly. Members enjoy a subscription to the award-winning SGQ, as well as exclusive access to our historic archives dating back to 1906. Learn more and subscribe at stainedglass.org. I'd also like to thank Canfield Technologies, whose quality solders have set the standard for over 160 years. No one else in the industry has a better brand following. Find out why at canfieldmetals.com. Now, when I put the call out on Instagram for questions for Derek, listener at GlassyM responded, "No questions, but I think I'm most excited for this episode. I'm a Derek superfan." Well, I couldn't agree with you more, so let's get into it. Join me as I crack it all wide open. Hi.
Hi.
It is so good to see you. I'm so excited to connect with you today.
Yeah, it's lovely to connect with you as well, Siobhan. I've been seeing you on social media, and like so many artists whose work I love, I kind of connect first of all through things like Instagram, and that's how I find you. So it was just wonderful that you reached out to say hello to me as well.
Same. you've been on my radar for a long time. I've been wanting to ask you to come on to the podcast. And then when we spoke, you asked if you could record it as well for your YouTube channel, because you have a whole collection of wonderful artist interviews there as well. And so now I don't know who's interviewing who, but I'm just happy to be here. I don't know what's going to happen. This is a little outside how it normally happens, but I'm excited. Thank you
me
so
too.
much.
This is your show, 100%. So yeah, you take this where you want it to go. It's just lovely to be part of your podcast season.
Oh, thank you so much. You're joining us from Leicestershire in the UK.
Yep.
It's like smack dab in the middle of England. It's right in the middle.
It is. It's really weird because I love being by the sea. I love the coast. And this is really the landlocked part of England. Originally, I'm from Scotland, but I moved down south many moons ago. And you couldn't actually get further away from the coast if you tried. So I kind of miss it. But yeah, if you drop a pin right in the center of England, you'll hit Leicestershire.
I'm glad you said you were from Scotland, because I was like, I don't think it's a British accent. I feel like there's something else going on there. But after you've been living, I'm sure, in the UK for, in England for a while, you kind of get like a little mix.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I first came down, I found it really difficult to understand the accent, because the Leicestershire accent is really quite a particular accent. And especially on the telephone, like I would say words like A for apple, like the letter A, but people would hear that as E, the letter E. So you end up having to kind of change your accent slightly. I really don't want to change my accent. I'm really happy and proud to be Scottish, but you have to kind of like, I don't know, just allow people to understand you, especially on the telephone. So I think it probably has changed over the years, but I've been down south for a long time now, Siobhan, so 30 odd years. So I don't want to lose my accent completely, but yeah, it's probably changed a bit over the years.
Yeah, and I'm sure when you visit home, it like snaps right back into place.
Well, it's really weird actually, because when I go back up to Scotland, everybody sounds so broad and so Scottish. It's kind of like when your ear is used to a certain kind of sound, you move to a different area, and it takes you by surprise a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I love Scotland. I mean, it's Edinburgh is where I sort of my spiritual home, and I love that. I love that city. And yeah, but having lived down here, but I have a family down here. I've been living here for, as I say, over 30 years, and my studio's down here. And so I'm really happy to be living down in England.
And who's in your family? What does that entail? Who does that entail?
So, yeah, my wife, Sue, she is a photographer. She is sort of a professional photographer, and she's a picture framer. So she splits her time between doing photography work for sort of lifestyle photography. She doesn't like doing weddings. I think she says it makes her feel too nervous, which I can understand. You've always got to get that money shot in a wedding, and it's like if something goes wrong, it's like you can't redo it. So she doesn't like doing weddings, but yeah, she loves doing all kinds of other types of photography, which is it's fantastic. And we have two daughters. So our oldest daughter, Ruby, has just started art school over in Bristol. So she's basically started this week. So she's busy trying to find accommodation. She's staying with family friends at the moment, and trying to find her first digs. So yeah, it's an exciting time for her. And our younger daughter, Lily, is still at college, still at school. So she's got one more year to go, and she's doing art and fashion. And then I don't know what she's going to do next. I think she's probably going to go to art school, but I'm not sure. We don't push them into art school, by the way. It's just something that they've decided to do. It's kind of like you don't always necessarily want to do what your parents are doing if they're in the sort of creative industries. But yeah, our girls really like art and being creative as well. So yeah, it's great. They're sort of continuing their own path.
Have you taught them how to do stained glass?
I have, yeah. I mean, when they were younger, especially, they used to bring their friends into the studio. It was like, come into the studio and have a look at, and Dad, can we make a leaded glass window? So I would make lots of leaded glass windows with the kids. I mean, I was nervous. I mean, how old are your kids?
I just have one, and she's 7.
Just one. She's 7. Is she making glass with you? Is she in your studio making?
Not yet. I haven't let her into the studio yet.
Yeah.
I think every kid's different, right? Like I think I've talked about this before in the podcast, but I've met some kids where I'm like, I would totally let you're young, but I feel like you seem like you have good coordination, and you seem like you listen to instructions. You're a good listener. I haven't let my daughter in yet.
Yeah, well, you know, I completely get it. I was so nervous about the kid, you know, because you know what it's like with glass. Just you can cut yourself without even feeling it. It's so sharp, and especially when they're small, their heads are like at the level of the workbench, so they're kind of like right down at the glass level. And so I was always really nervous to kind of get them involved, but I was supervising them, and yeah, I mean, they've made a few windows over the years, and the friends have come in have made a few windows. So yeah, it's lovely, and some of the stuff's really interesting as well, because it's lovely to sort of teach glass to people who've never done it before, because they always have new solutions. They always kind of do things in a different way, and I think that's part of the fun of it, isn't it? When you can see people kind of solving a problem, like a visual idea in a different way, and you think, oh, I haven't thought of doing it that way. You know, it's
Yeah,
good.
you have to like put your ego out of the way when the 10-year-old's like, why don't you do it like this? And you're like,
Yeah,
why don't I do it like that? That's actually quite smart of you. Okay.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think it's so cool to have a children's piece. As you know, most parents, the bin that they have of all their kids' artwork when they were little is just like crayon and marker. And then we're going to have these like heirloom, like tactile, beautiful children's artworks to save and to really, put up for the rest of our lives, which I think is really special.
Oh, absolutely. You should see our fridge. I mean, our fridge is just, I'm sure everybody's fridge is the same if they've got creative kids. It's like full of drawings and photographs and things kept over the years. And we've kept loads of the kids' art over the years. And our younger daughter, Lily, at the moment is in the middle of her A levels, which is the kind of like the serious part of the school curriculum, and so she's painting all the time, and all of our downstairs is just like she's spread out everywhere. So there's oil painting going on, and there's charcoal going on, and there's stuff on the computer, and it's kind of like she's spread everywhere. So our house is a little bit of a creative mess at the moment, but it's cool. I love it, and I love watching them being creative as well,
Now, when you said that, it gave me a little bit of anxiety. I'm like, is she getting like charcoal and paint everywhere? Like, how is it like messy? Is it dirty messy, or is it like how are you a neat person? Are you tell me more about that.
It gives me anxiety as well. I mean, we're kind of trying to keep things neat and tidy. Obviously, I was really nervous about when she said it like that. I want to start using oils, and it was like, what? Oils, that doesn't come out of furniture really easily at all. So yeah, I was slightly nervous about it, but we kind of we've got surfaces that are tight, we cover the areas that we need to be covered, and she can work in certain areas. But she's really, in some ways, she's a messy worker. She just spreads out everywhere, which is just the way she works. It's just the way her brain is at the moment. It's really kind of firing off on all cylinders. She wants to do this, and she wants to do that, and then she wants to do the other, and she wants to do them all at the same time. So, it's kind of corralling her and trying to keep her into one space is almost impossible. But it's always for a limited period. As I'm sure you know, every part of raising kids is like a phase. You kind of think this is the way it is, and then suddenly it sort of morphs into something else, and you think, actually, that part of our life isn't here anymore. It's morphed into something else. And I think this time with her being so messy it's only really going to happen for the next few months until she finishes this qualification, and then it'll be done, so yeah, we're kind of putting up with it.
Yeah, you're just keeping her away from the fine furniture, the good stuff.
Yeah, try to.
You are a self-described stained glass geek. We can all connect and relate to that. YouTuber and accredited conservator, and also a teacher. Your studio is called Limelight Studios, and you teach glass painting and leaded stained glass. So, let's see here. Your YouTube channel has thousands of subscribers, and for good reason. There you share inspirational videos as well as tips and tricks for glass painting and stained glass. I was looking at it today. You have about 99 videos posted, and they're broken up into categories. You have your Road to Recovery vlog, which we'll get into all these things. Your stained glass tutorials, your artist interviews, your shorts, and your inspirational glass. Now, first, we touched on this earlier, but I just want to give you a standing ovation for your production quality because your camera work is so good. Your lighting is always on point. Your editing is tight, and your graphics and music is just always so well chosen. And you also, it's not only just like the, you know, the post-production part of it that I really admire, but you speak so well into the camera. And specifically, I feel like I want to acknowledge the speed of which you speak, because you get to the point and you're very concise, but it doesn't seem rushed, but it's also like at a quicker clip than you would be having a conversation with somebody normally. You hit the mark, and it's hard. It's really hard.
Well, it's really funny you should say that, because I started just talking directly to camera, and all I use is my phone. I'm just talking now to you in my iPhone, and that's basically what I use for everything. But the iPhones now are so fantastic, aren't they? They're so high quality, and once you've kind of worked out how to film on light tables so that you don't get the flicker, and if you buy a little, like a ring light, you can see one of the ring lights behind me. Amazon is great for just like the microphone, things like that. You do a little bit of research, you can buy the things. It's not that difficult. The thing that's time consuming, as I'm sure you know, is the editing. Once you've kind of got all your footage together, it's putting it together in a way that keeps people interested in it. That's what I find exciting and interesting. Is kind of like, it's a new area for me. The whole kind of production of making videos is really fun, but it's time consuming, and there's a lot to learn, and there's a whole set of things that are at play kind of under the hood that you have to kind of do to keep people's interest. So I'm kind of still learning, to be honest, but I enjoy it. And yeah, I try not to get too intimidated by all the technology.
So you're doing this all yourself. Do you have a background in this, or did you learn on YouTube in a very sort of meta way?
Yeah, I did. I mean, YouTube's amazing. It's like the second biggest search engine next to Google, isn't it? I mean, it's owned by Google. So it's kind of like a big search engine. So if you've got a question, you just go onto YouTube and you'll find an answer for it. And so I kind of, the interesting thing was, you know, lockdown, we had lockdown in 2021, and I was, like all of us, stuck in the house, and I had worked for a period of time, and then I eventually kind of ran out of that work, and I was at a loss, and I was fine for a while, but then it actually was getting me down. I kind of wanted to kind of do something, and I don't know about you, but I kind of define myself by what I do. You know, it's like if you meet new people, usually people will say, what do you do for a living? It's like how that it's so important for all of us, I think, what we do. And if you can say you're an artist or a glass artist or whatever, you feel as if that gives you a sense of yourself. And so when I was in lockdown and not doing anything, I kind of felt like I was dissolving. I just didn't know what I was meant to be doing because I wasn't doing art. So my younger brother, I used to kind of have Zoom meetings with I've got two brothers. I'm oldest of three. And my middle brother lives in Australia. And we used to Zoom each other every week just to chat, because he was in lockdown as well. And he said, look, Derek, why don't you start making YouTube videos? You know, you've got everything basically there. Why don't you just set up? So he suggested it to me. And I thought, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And it would also give me something to do when I was in lockdown. So I started just on YouTube looking at, you know, how to kind of light it, how to get a decent sound from a microphone, to wear headphones when you're recording so you don't get feedback, those kind of things. So I kind of learned on YouTube. So to answer your question, I kind of taught myself. And just the first video I made actually is actually one of the most watched ones, and I just sat down in front of the camera and spoke to the camera, and I was making a window for an exhibition at the British Society of Master Glass Painters, and it was a self-portrait of me during lockdown. So I kind of just filmed it, and I cut all the glass and stuck the camera on a little tripod and filmed it and put it together on YouTube. And yeah, it got a good response. It kind of like a whole lot of people decided they liked it, and I thought, okay, obviously there's a need out there, I'll just carry on. So I decided to keep going, and I kind of felt that, I don't know about you, but I just don't think there's enough good information out there about glass and how to inspire people. And I think I'm a little bit, I've said a few times in my own videos that I'm a little bit worried about the future for glass. I don't know what it's like in the States, and I do want to ask you about your view on, you know, how you find the glass world in the States, but certainly in the UK, I learned at art school, and there used to be a lot of different art courses available, degree courses like 3 years and 4 year courses. They're virtually all gone. So you wonder and you worry where that next generation is going to learn about stained glass, and whether they're even going to think about it, whether it's even going to be on their radar, you know, because if you don't show it to the next generation, they're not even going to think it's available. And it's certainly if it's not being taught in colleges, so where is it going to be taught? So I kind of feel like I should sort of try and just put out there what I've learned. I never call myself an expert. I'm just like I'm on a journey like everybody else. I'm a student. I'm forever the student, and I'm learning, but I've learned something along the way, and I kind of feel if I can put that out in a digestible, entertaining, interesting way, then that's kind of like something that people can refer back to. So I've kind of decided to keep going, and so I've compartmentalized it into tutorials and inspirational videos and artist interviews, and sometimes it's really nice to just interview your heroes. You know, I get to interview people whose work I love, and it gives me like a front row seat to kind of ask them questions about their work and their inspiration. And I find that really exciting. So for me, it's been a tremendous thing that happened out of a lockdown situation that was quite bleak, you know, when I didn't have anything to do. So it kind of, it gave me a sense of direction. So coming back into it now, it's kind of spinning all the different plates, doing, you know, designing and running a professional studio and doing new work and conservation work and doing teaching. I teach here in the studio and I teach at Ely Cathedral. There's a stained glass museum over there, and I teach over there. So it's kind of quite busy, but I like being busy. I don't know about you, but I kind of like having lots to do.
I just wrote down me too. I always like to take notes while people talk so I can like refer back, because I'm like, I forget what I wanted to say, but I just wrote me too. I 100% agree with you. I think glass is such an incredible medium that is overlooked so much. I think just because it's so old and because everybody usually thinks of like ecclesiastical, they think of sacred spaces, and it's so much more than that. And I think that religious branding on it, I think, is like off-putting to a lot of people. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's looked past. I think that your show, your YouTube channel, I think this podcast we're playing tiny parts in a huge wave of it becoming popular again. And as for like how people are learning, it's evolving. It's not going to be in colleges so much anymore. I think it's going to be a little bit more guerrilla style. I think it's going to be people watching your YouTube videos. I think it's people taking classes at, you know, in whatever city that they're in. There's like one class, and now there's a huge wait list for it because more and more people want to take it. The only area that I'm worried about is I don't think there's enough people learning about conservation. And a lot of people are making stained glass right now, more and more every day, but what we're not learning how to do is how to conserve it, because it's all going to need some conservation down the road.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah, I completely agree with you on so many points. I think starting with church art, I 100% agree with you. Most people don't consider stained glass art at all. They think of it as sort of religious art, something of the past, you know, and I don't see many creatives who coming from other industries coming into glass and saying, I wonder what my art would look like made in glass. I think we need to see so many more creatives coming in from other disciplines, like graffiti artists, muralists, you know, painters, filmmakers, you know, people from completely different walks of life, bringing their really interesting view of the world into glass. And I think that's going to be the salvation of glass. It's not going to be through church art. Church art has its place, but and I agree with you about people finding art now through social media. I mean, this is where we all live, isn't it? We all live in this cyber world now. The first thing most of us do in the morning, unless we're really disciplined, is reach for our phones, and we'll look at our emails or we'll look at social media. And I mean, who would have guessed 10 years ago that it would have become the thing that it is. And I think lockdown has made it even more popular. Like, I'm talking to you now, like as if we're in the same room together, and it's made it so much easier for all of us to be able to do this. It feels really comfortable and normal for us to be able to talk to each other. I didn't know what Zoom was before lockdown. I didn't know what, I'd never done any of that kind of thing. So
Same.
it's made all of us really much more comfortable about it, and it's made the world smaller. And that's what's exciting. And because the world's smaller, it means we can reach more people with our message. Now, going on to the whole thing about conservation, yeah, I think that's a big area. In Europe, in the UK, it's a little bit more developed. We have an accreditation process here in the UK, which basically means you go through like a peer review. So you get reviewed by conservation studios who are at the top of the tree, and they will come to your studio and they will have a look at how you do your conservation work, how you document your work, how you store your glass, the whole process of conservation. It's like a process, and they kind of look at that and they basically decide whether you are doing it in the way that is the right way, and then you'll get an accreditation if you meet their standards. So I'm accredited as a conservator. So there's certain protocols and processes that I have to adhere to about documentation and before and after photographs and all those kind of things. And again, in Europe, it's pretty well developed, and so a lot of funding comes along on the back of accreditation. So I go to a lot of churches to write reports. I write condition reports on medieval glass or Victorian glass, and I'll do a survey and I'll make recommendations, and that then allows the church to apply for grants and apply for money because it's come from an accredited conservator. So there's a kind of a whole system in place which allows funding for projects. Now, that's not to say that there's not lots of great studios who are not accredited. There are, and some studios don't want to be accredited, and I completely respect that. There's a lot of great studios out there who say, look, we're good enough. We don't need somebody to come in and tell us that we're good at what we do, and they do a great job. So accreditation's not for everyone, but it's for me, it has allowed me access to some of the top people in this country. So I can phone up, Canterbury Cathedral Studios or Barley Studios or Holywell Glass, great, studios who are at the top of their game, York Glaziers, and ask them questions about, look, I've got a problem, how do I solve this? And I'll get best quality answers. So for me, it's really important to be accredited, and I think maybe in the States, maybe that's something that you're working towards. I don't know if that's in place, if you have an accreditation system. I was due to go to a conference over at Corning earlier on this year before I became ill, and I know there were a number of conservators talking at that conference. The American Glass Guild was doing their annual conference. As we know, it's the Year of Glass 2022. So I would have wanted to talk to them about that. And so I still haven't got a full picture about conservation in the States. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about where that stands at the moment?
I can't. I cannot. But I am interviewing Ariana Macau from Zalani Glass, and she is up in Oakland, and that's her area. So I'm going to talk to her about it. So, everybody stay tuned. I'm going to ask her, and we'll do a deep dive on that with her and see what she has to say about it.
Yeah, I mean,
the thing is, sorry, go ahead.
That's very interesting. I mean, I think there isn't enough information out there about how you tackle it, because you've got a whole lot of different problems to what we have in Europe. You've got all the Tiffany windows and the John Lafargue windows and the double plating and the treble plating and all that stuff. I mean, I went to the Museum of Modern Art and the Guggenheim, and I had a look at some of the most incredible American art from Tiffany. And it's so immensely complicated, and it's going to be a real job to conserve that, because eventually it's going to need conserving. So it's going to be really interesting to see, how the studios in the States are going to tackle that. That's a big set of problems that's particular for America, really.
Yeah, and I feel like with conservation, there's a little less guerrilla style. You can't really, you kind of have to know what you're doing. Like, you can't just kind of like get in there and start digging around. There's a lot of rules about how you take things apart and how you put them back together, and there's a lot of safety issues with it. So yeah, I want to hear about it too, because I don't know about any of that, what's going on, how it's different here than there.
Well, it's kind of like it's kind of a thing in its own self, isn't it? Like conservation of glass is like a whole discipline, and it's a big world, and certainly it's a big part of what's happening in the UK. That some of the biggest studios in the UK are essentially conservation studios, and so there's a lot of conservation work happening, and you tend to find that the people that are doing the new work, the kind of breakthrough work, or like pushing at the boundaries and doing creative, interesting things, tend to be much smaller. They're usually, you know, husband and wife, or 2 or 3 people working in a studio, or even like myself, I work on my own, you know, and they're the ones that are doing the new work on a much smaller scale. So it's almost like 2 different pools to swim in. You know, there's the conservation world and there's the new world, and I like working with both. You use different sides of your brain for conservation work, but essentially, to be honest, I'm an artist. I'm a creative at heart. I mean, that I trained as an artist at art school, and that's what I love doing, and that's really my passion. So that's where I focus most of my attention these days.
I think in order to be in the other pool and stay there, you really have to have a love of history, like a true deep love of history that goes beyond just like having a few favorite artists from the past, you know, that you take inspiration from.
For sure. I mean, it's a big topic. There's the whole thing about being able to identify studios, you know, be able to recognize styles. Each studio has a sort of stylistic signature. So they have a way of using paint, or they have a color palette, or the way they draw faces, or even inscriptions. I mean, I'm not brilliant at it, I'll admit. I mean, a lot of the time I can recognize a lot of the studios, the kind of bigger studios, but I get stumped. And that's where having access to other experts, especially historical glass experts here in the UK, and I'll send them images and say, look, do you know who this window's by? And, you know, 9 times out of 10, they'll come up with the correct answer. And it might be an artist that I might not have heard of. So there's a whole big world that I freely admit I'm not an expert in. I have a great working knowledge of how to conserve glass, and I know I can do it safely, and I'm a safe pair of hands, and I document what I do, and I go to conferences and I go to symposiums to learn kind of best practice. And so you're always kind of updating best practice and how things are done. But yeah, the whole world of conservation, it's a big deep dive, you know, it's a big pool, and most of the big studios are in that pool. So I love dipping my toe in both areas. Well,
guess what? You're an expert. So.
Well, I've never called myself an expert. I'm just, you know, I love the process, and I love learning.
You're accredited in the way that you just told us, but you're also a fellow of the British Society of Master Glass Painters. You're a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. You're accredited stained glass conservator with over 37 years of experience, and you're PACR accredited. What is PA? Can you tell us what PACR stands for?
Yeah, basically it's an accreditation that goes along with being a conservator. So it's you'll get a continuing professional development review every now and again. You will be asked to submit kind of a series of folders on what conferences you've been to, what your 5-year plan is, you know, what areas you feel you need to work on. It's a kind of a deep dive by interested colleagues who want to just make sure that you're still learning and still discovering. So PACRA is the kind of umbrella organization that organizes these continuing professional review things. They're basically assessments to make sure that you're attending conferences and things like that. Because at the end of the day, stained glass conservation, it's not an exact science. It's like an evolving discipline, and something that was in vogue maybe 10 years ago, people now say, actually, that's not working as well as we thought it was going to work, and we're going to tweak it and change it. And so conservation is always changing. So it's important to kind of try and keep abreast of it. But as I say, my main love is new work and doing exciting new things with glass and finding creative people out there whose work I find interesting, because there's always new ways of doing things, right?
There really is. There's a couple of things you have on your website on the page about conservation that I didn't know what they were. And so I thought maybe you could help me out in understanding, and maybe our listeners don't know what it is either. So one thing is called edge bonding and enameling. The little blurb underneath it says, minimum intervention is one of the key philosophies in stained glass conservation. Our edge bonding and backplating ensures we maintain the integrity of the glass whenever possible. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, that mantra, minimum intervention, is something you hear a lot in conservation. Basically, it's a fancy way of saying just do enough to conserve what's left of the material. It's like anything in a museum. You know, you don't want to interfere too much with it. So you want to just do as little as you can to slow down the aging process. And as we all know, glass itself doesn't really age tremendously. I mean, we've got medieval glass here in Britain that is from the 1100s that is old, and it does pit after a period of time. But most glass will last for centuries. What happens is the lead decays after a period of time, and the paint might become unstable. So you basically want to make sure that if you're cleaning it and if you're looking after it, that you document it all and you do as little as you need to do to kind of make sure that you prolong the life of the window. The window will eventually decay and fall to bits over hundreds of years, but what you want to do as a conservator is just slow that down. So there's different methods you can use to slow that process down. I won't go into all of the details of it now, but there are ways of glazing the window so you bring it inside a church and it's not exposed to the elements anymore. It's almost like making it like a hanging picture that you hang inside a church, and you protect it from the elements, and you stabilize the paint in different ways like that. Edge bonding, you mentioned edge bonding. That's a little bit like a vase. If you imagine like a Ming vase in a museum that's fractured and they glue it all back together again, just with glue at the edge, you can do that with glass as well. So there are different types of epoxy resins and silicons that you can use, which are long lasting and they don't decay in UV light. So you can edge bond the glass together. It used to be the case that we'd always put a little strip of lead between the crack, and then you put it back into the window. But that sometimes can be a bit unsightly. If you've got a crack over a face and then you put a lead line through it, that doesn't look great. So edge bonding is a way of kind of solving that problem a little bit by just making the repair a little bit less obvious. So there's lots of things like that you can do to conserve glass, but the minimum intervention is the important bit. It's like just only do the minimum that you need to do to prolong the life. So I don't know if that it's a big topic, so it's kind of I know
it's hard to well, I really just wanted to know specifically what edge bonding was. So you totally answered that. And so now, are you finding yourself having to go back and do edge bonding on pieces that were fixed in the old style with the lead line through the face?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, periodically things break down. I mean, even the best studios their work might break down over a period of time, and you've got to look at it again. So yeah, I mean, we're always kind of looking at how things were done 10 years, 15 years ago, and assessing whether it's still working or whether we need to kind of change that. I'm learning all the time as well. I'm not presenting myself in any way as an expert. There are experts in specific areas like glass chemists, who know the chemistry of glass. I'll go to them for advice. I'm not a glass chemist. I'm also not an art historian. I have a fairly good working knowledge of the history of glass, but I'm not a historian, and there's lots I don't know. So you kind of got to understand your own limitations, and then work with people that could help you, so that at the end of the day you have like a group of people maybe working on something and it's going to be well looked after because you've got good advice from the best people. So yeah, it's great fun, but it's kind of, as I say, it's different from new work. It's a completely different headspace.
You're kind of like a general contractor.
Yeah, well, I try to be. I mean, I enjoy doing lots of different things. Essentially, I'm a glass I'm a glass artist. That's what I am. But if I do conservation, in order to do it well, I may as well learn how to do it well, and become accredited was part of that process, And it's also allowed me to kind of, talk to glass people who are not maybe making new work, but they're doing really fantastic conservation work. So I enjoy the full range. It's like being a cook, isn't it? It's like being a chef. You're not just going to make your own signature dish every day. You're going to want to learn Korean food or Italian food, or you're going to want to learn lots of different recipes, because sometimes you're going to get bored of doing that one signature dish that you might be really good at, but you want to learn different things. And that's what I enjoy, is learning different things along the way. Yeah.
And conservation feels like it's one of those things where, like, the more you know, the more questions you have.
For sure.
Like, it's just like never ending.
Yeah, exactly. I think the more you learn, the more you realize you know very little. I think essentially.
I mean, that's why I keep saying you're an expert, and you're like, I don't know anything. I don't know what's going on. It's because you know so much that you know that you don't know anything at all.
I think it's the only thing that you do realize is that there's an awful lot to know, and you're never going to know it all. So just be honest and say what the little bit that you know about and what you don't know about. Try and find people that can find you an answer for it.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing that I wrote down was EPG isothermal glazing. And it says, environmental protective glazing is one of the best ways to ensure historic glass is protected from the elements and the corrosive effects of condensation, and it is completely reversible. So this is a different kind of glazing that's specific to what?
Yeah, well, I touched on it a little bit earlier about bringing a stained glass window into a building. So you're almost taking a church stained glass window. If you imagine a lancet window, you're taking it out of the stonework or the brickwork, and you're putting a frame around it. And where you've taken the window out, there's a hole. So you put plain glass in the place of that. So you're protecting the building from the weather, etc. And you're hanging the stained glass window back inside. So it's being lit by natural light, but it's inside the building. So that's what environmental protective glazing is. You're protecting it from the environment, and it has lots of great benefits. It slows down the deterioration of paint, because sometimes paint is susceptible to water damage. So condensation is a big problem. If you get a damp church, and you get the cold glass, you get the dampness condensing on the cold glass, and that damages the paint after a period of time. So EPG, environmental protective glazing, is one way of kind of solving that problem, because when you take the window out of the elements and you bring it into the church, it becomes the same temperature as the rest of the room, so you don't get condensation on the glass, if that makes sense. So you get rid of the condensation problem.
And I imagine that anything that's any glass like that that's closer to the ocean probably deteriorates. The enamel deteriorates much faster because of the salt too.
For sure. It's a harsh environment by the sea. Yeah. I mean, you tend to get higher winds and you get the corrosive effects of salt, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's also different levels of light and where the glass is in a building, like the south side of a building. The glass will age quicker than the north side of a building, because the sun rises in the east and goes over the south side of a building and then sinks in the west. So you tend to find that windows deteriorate quicker on the south side. So yeah, there's lots of environmental things to think about. With glass, it's a big topic.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your personal work. Your portfolio is so impressive. My favorite is the Belfry Shopping Center in Red Hill. It's a transitional stained glass window on the theme of conspicuous consumption. And I didn't look up what conspicuous consumption was, but I was like, whoa, consumption. Well, it's a shopping center. So is that a statement about consumerism?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was made a few years ago now. It was a great project, actually. It was quite a few years ago. It was a shopping center in Red Hill, and they had this big wall, and the architects didn't know what to do with it. So a friend of a friend mentioned that I made stained glass windows. So they got in contact with me and said, look, do you want to put a stained glass window on this big wall and we're going to backlight it? And I said, yeah, sounds fantastic. And I'd never really done anything on that scale before. So it's sort of a little bit about conspicuous consumption, which is basically the fact that it's a shopping center and everybody goes to a shopping center to buy stuff. And I think in a way, shopping centers are a little bit like our new cathedrals. You know, we all meet at shopping centers nowadays, and that's where we go for our entertainment and our sustenance. And if we're needing a little bit of cheering up, we don't go generally to a church. We'll go to a shopping center and have a bit of retail therapy. So it's a little bit of a pun on that. But yeah, that was a fun one to do. That was, I can't remember how many years ago. I've been making windows professionally for about 37 years, so I kind of lose track of exactly what year I made things, but that was an early one.
Do you remember about how big it is?
Yeah, I think it's probably about 15 meters high, something like that, maybe something like that. And it's quite high up in the air, so it's not on the ground floor, so you have to kind of look up at it. I haven't visited it for a while, but I believe it's still there. The thing about doing work in retail places or airports or theaters is there's no guarantee it's going to be there for a long period of time, because like developers can come in and say, actually, we want that wall space for a big advertising campaign, so the stained glass gets removed. So I'm not sure if it's still there. I kind of think it is, but there's no guarantee that it's going to be there forever. I remember there was a project that Brian Clarke, who's a kind of a famous UK glass artist, did for Stansted Airport. And he made all this amazing stained glass, and it lasted a few years before the contractors came in and ripped it out because they wanted the space for something else. And you think, my God, these are Brian Clarke windows. Do you know what you've got here? But it's disposable. I think modern glass is much more disposable than our old glass that we see in churches.
Oh my gosh, I never thought about it like that, but you're so right. Developers, like, they don't care. They don't see. How do you sign your work?
How do I sign it? Yeah. Oh, I have a little monogram, so DH plus the date underneath. So I've been signing my work for a number of years, because I think it's quite important that all of us, you know, if we're making glass and it's going to last for any length of time, that we put a little signature in there so that people know whose work it is. So just for the record, really, so that there's nothing worse than seeing something that you might like and having no idea who made it, or you know what year it was made or whatever. So yeah, just as a matter of process, I have a little signature which I'll send to you. It's like a little monogram, and I put it on my stuff, and I use it on my letterheads, and then I think it's on my website and things like that as well. Do you paint it on? Yeah. How do you? Okay. Yeah, I just paint it on, and then I use little needles and I scratch it out. And I mean, sometimes if I'm working with other studios, sometimes I'll work with studios in Germany or here in the UK, and they'll use a different process. They might screen print it on or airbrush it on. It depends what techniques we're using at the time. But yeah, it's usually painted on. Okay, it made me think of that, because we were talking about like maybe them taking it out and like what do they do with it, and it would behoove us all to sign our work in case that happens. Maybe they'll call us first, right? They'll be like, well, here's her signature. Let's get in touch with her and let her, you know. Yeah. Maybe she wants it back. I don't know. Well, if you do any public art, I mean, it certainly has been the case that if you go in for a competition, for example, in the States or here in the UK, sometimes part of the clause will be that you'll assign ownership of the artwork to whoever is commissioning it, and basically it's up to them how long they want to keep it. And sometimes they will also say that they will tell the artist if they're going to dispose of the artwork, and that does happen. You know, if it's in a public place and you know it's the building gets knocked down or remodeled in some way, the artwork will disappear. So sometimes the artist will be told, but not always. And so, yeah, it kind of feels slightly sacrilegious to dispose of stained glass, but it's just an artwork. It's just like any other artwork. And if it's gone beyond its usefulness, then it's got rid of, you know? I don't like that. No, I don't like it either. Okay, there's another one. It's the Saffron Lane Doctor's Surgery there in Leicestershire. Leaded antique glass windows hand painted with optical glass prisms. What are optical glass prisms? Well, you imagine just like a triangle made of glass. It's like a piece of crystal made into a triangle. So if you look at it end on, it's like a triangle, but then it's elongated out into a prism. One. Yeah. They're great, aren't they? They're great to
Yeah.
work with. I spent a long time making windows, different types of windows, using prisms, because I used to love the fact that it would like spectrum the light, and you get this rainbow of color. And as like the sun moves around a building, you'd get this rainbow of color on the carpet and up the walls, and it made the artwork a little bit more dynamic and unpredictable. And so, yeah, that Saffron Lane project was for a doctor's surgery. And basically I was asked to make 2 big windows for the kind of walkway between the meeting room area, the waiting room, and the doctor's surgery. So I was imagining patients sitting there feeling a little bit nervous about meeting their doctor. So I wanted to create an artwork that was kind of uplifting and distracting. So there are 2 colorful windows with prisms running all the way down them. And I did,
So pretty.
yeah, I did lots of windows with prisms over the years. There was another one for a theatre called the Mask Theatre in Kettering, and it was like a 12 square meter new stained glass window, and it was the first time I started using screen printing. So I used a lot of screen printed images, and I had musical instruments, and I had words, and I had dancers, and I had the prisms in there. And it was all about performance and the kind of dynamism of performance. And the prisms were like front and center. They were a really important part of the design. It's kind of the ultimate solar powered artwork, isn't it? It's just like it's switched on every day at sunrise, and it switches off at night at sunset. And it's just wonderful. And it's so long lasting. I mean, our work will last, hopefully, for years to come. And yeah, it's lovely painting with light. I love it.
Well, you're incredible at it. You truly are. Just your work is so remarkable, so beautiful, so inspiring. Thank you for all the beauty that you put into the world.
Yeah, you're welcome. And your work is fantastic, and I love the fact that you've got this beautiful kind of arrangement where you're selling your work as well. I mean, that's an area that I want to get into. I'm kind of keen to ask you a little bit about that, because that seems to be the next way forward. It's so it's so easy for us now to kind of go onto Amazon and buy things and to shop online. And why don't we buy our art online as well? How are you finding it? How do you find that whole process of putting your work online? Has it been good for you?
It has been good for me. I've sold a few different ways. I've done retail, like through stores. And I just think that direct to the consumer is the best for me. I don't really like splitting my money up with somebody,
Yeah, for sure.
And I like to be in charge of packing things too. So it's worked really well for me. I think as long as you are able to take like really good quality photographs of your work, I think that's like a big key piece to it. But it's worked really well. Back to what we were talking about earlier with social media, like that's my biggest connection to anybody that enjoys my work is through my Instagram. That's always been where I've sold the most, where I've reached the most people. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a wonderful thing, social media, because you will have people from all over the world who are saying hi and DMing you and you're in dialogue with people from all over the world, as I am, and that's just so invigorating. I just think it's really lovely, and to reach out to other artists, other glass artists, and see their work and to be able to talk with them in real time is just. It's fantastic. We didn't have this facility just a few short years ago. And I think shopping online is definitely the way forward. It's something that I need to explore. I haven't really explored it yet, but I kind of see it as the natural progression. If we're living our kind of life online increasingly, as we are, obviously we keep our private life separately. I keep my private life completely separately, and that doesn't go online at all. But my professional life and the stuff that I create, that goes online, and I kind of see increasingly that that's where our audience is, because that's the first place that most of us will go. We'll go onto Google, we'll go onto YouTube, we'll go onto Instagram, or Facebook, or Twitter, or I'm sure there's going to be more platforms coming on stream as well, and that's where the audience is. So I think in a way we've got to present ourselves in our best light to that audience.
I think so too. And I think that it's better for the person who's buying your work because they get to know the person behind it. It's more personal. And for us as well, I want to know where my art is going to live. I haven't been doing stained glass nearly as long as you have. I learned 7 years ago. And so I'm still, every time somebody buys a piece, I'm like, tell me more. I want to see all the pictures of it hanging. I want to know how you feel about it. I'm going to check back in with you in a year. Did you move it somewhere? Do you still feel that way about it? Like I feel very personally invested in all my pieces, and I love knowing exactly where they live.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. It's like one of your children, isn't it? You kind of want to know that they're going to be well looked after, that they're going to a good home, that they're going to be appreciated. Yeah, I completely get that. For a period of time, I used to do exhibitions, and I would do paintings, and I would do stained glass in like light boxes, and I'd had a couple of sort of one-man shows, and I had a few group shows as well. And I've sold some pieces that way, and I've always wanted to know, just as you were saying, I've always wanted to know about the people that want to buy the work, and where they're going to put it, because it's like one of your children, and you kind of have an attachment to it. You care about it, and you care where it goes. So yeah, I completely get that you want it to be all the way part of that pipeline, from getting the inquiry to packing the glass up and making sure it gets to that person that loves your work. It's important that you kind of feel that it's being loved in the way that you love it.
Yeah, because I'm still like amazed that it was just an idea in my mind, and then it became a thing that somebody spent money on and is looking at every single day. If it's a gift, I want to know, do they like it? What was their reaction? I really want to get into it, because when you sell things in stores, I mean, trust me, that has its benefits as well. But if you are doing a wholesale situation, it almost feels like a misconnection where you're like, where are you? Where are you? You're just like floating around in the world. And so we just don't ever, that's it. It feels strange to have the first half of the journey with your piece, and then it just poof, vanishes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that it's really nice to be able to offer things to people, because people want to have, if they like your work, they want part of it, and they might not necessarily be able to commission a big piece of work, but kind of making small pieces or making almost like prints. A friend of mine, John Rentians, who's a fantastic glass artist here in the UK, recently started doing prints, and he's selling them online. And he said it's fantastic because people will come to his studio and they'll see that he has prints, and they will buy a print. It's just almost like a spontaneous purchase, because they just want something to take away from their visit. They've enjoyed his art and enjoyed visiting the studio. And I think kind of I'm having to sort of think in ways of like that, where how can I make my art consumable on a small scale? It doesn't have to be just consumable on a big scale, like an architectural piece. Those occasional projects are great, but I think it's kind of interesting, and the way you're approaching it, I find incredibly interesting. Your Patreon site, your online shop, the fact that you're doing your podcast, you hit the ground running.
Thank you. I have said this before, but I just find it so fascinating that people who are making much larger scale pieces, their goal is always to go smaller. And people that are making smaller pieces, their goal is always to go bigger.
Yeah, that's interesting. I read that piece. I read that on one of your posts, and I think it's true. I mean, I love doing large scale projects, and I really love getting my teeth into something that takes months. I'm doing a project just now for a school that's going to take me another couple of months to work through, and I just love being in the groove and working on that, and every day I come in and I'm working on it. But I kind of feel the need to make small scale things as well, because it's almost feeding a different need. You the need to make some. And also, we were talking earlier about the process of editing and how time consuming it is. Making stained glass windows, my God, it's time consuming. And sometimes you just want to speed the whole thing up, and you just want to be spontaneous. And like drawing or painting, you can get an effect. You have something in your head, you can get it down on paper, and in 10 minutes you've got something. And I just wish glass was like that, but it's not. It's much slower and much more long-winded. And you almost have to kind of come at it in sections, and that maybe several days down the line you'll get to where you want to be. So I kind of like the idea of maybe exploring other mediums as well, you know, photography or film or print, you know, those kind of things I think lend themselves to what we're doing as well.
I agree.
I noticed on your podcast, you often ask artists for hacks and shortcuts because we all have different ways of doing things. We can all learn from each other. Yeah.
Do you have a glass hack you'd like to share?
Well, there's something that I do sometimes with where I'm using print and I print onto acetate rather than having to paint something. You know, painting on glass is quite laborious. You have to film it, you have to put it in the kiln and fire it. Sometimes printing a design out onto clear acetate and then sandwiching it between two pieces of glass, you can get a really great effect. And then sometimes you can paint on top of it. So I will, if I want to experiment and get a quick result, I'll print it. I'll print the design out onto clear acetate, and you can buy acetate at any printing shop, and then put it in between colored glass, and you get that lovely colored effect. And I've done quite a few panels that way. It doesn't really work outside, like I don't think it lasts particularly long. It doesn't last particularly long in the weather. But if you're doing it for an exhibition piece, for example, or you just want to experiment and you're just curious as to how something will behave, you don't have to go through the whole process of painting it. Just print it out. And that's been a hack that I've used quite often to get a result. And that's maybe led on to me wanting to make it more permanent. I might want to then paint that design and fire it in the kiln. But certainly printing it out, first of all, is a great way of getting a quick result.
Did you come up with that yourself, or did somebody show you how to do that? It's so smart.
I just kind of developed it. I have done a few projects using different techniques over the years. So I've done quite a lot of screen printing or airbrushing, where you're actually airbrushing paints and enamels onto glass. And I use other studios to help me with that. And computer printing was another method. I did a big project for the John Rylands University Library up in Manchester, which was like a 12-meter high glass sculpture. And it had computer printing on acetate, and it was sandwiched between two pieces of glass. And I developed that technique with a studio, and it was the first time they'd really done it as well. So we kind of worked together, and it's a great piece. It's a big piece. It's backlit, and that started me on that journey of using printing and using printed technology on acetate, and then putting antique glass and interesting pieces of glass in front of that. And you can either backlight it or you can use it with natural daylight. So yeah, it kind of started with that project and then has just developed. We've got a thing called the British Society of Master Glass Painters, and they have exhibitions on. And I've done a few projects for that exhibition over the years, which have used printed technology. So yeah, it's fun to play with.
It's so smart. It is so smart. What size glass do you have to use?
Well, you're kind of limited to the piece of acetate that you're working on. So normally I have like A4 size acetate. So you just make sure you set up your printer to print on acetate. Usually they have different settings like glossy paper or plain paper or thick card. And you've usually got a setting for acetate. So just make sure you put the acetate the right way around, put it into the printer. And normally I put it through the printer a couple of times, because if you print it once, it's really quite pale. So I'll just put it back into the printer and print it again. So it'll print a couple of times, or sometimes I'll double plate two printed acetate pieces together. So you're limited to sort of an A4 size piece of glass. Normally the glass I would make is slightly smaller than that. So I would put it through the printer a couple of times, and then I'd have my colored piece of glass. I'd lay my colored piece of glass on top of the acetate, and with a sharp knife, I would just cut around the acetate. So then you've got your acetate exactly to the size of the glass. And then I put another piece of glass, like a thin piece of 2mm glass behind that, and then seal it all with either silicon sealant or copper foil. A little bit of copper foil all the way around it. And that will seal it all together. So then you've got your image trapped inside your glass. And of course, before you sandwich it all together, you might want to put a little bit of stain on the glass, or a little bit of paint, or a little bit of texture. So it allows you to do lots of things and then have this lovely sort of photographic image in the glass as well. And it's really easy to do, and it doesn't, you don't have to set up a whole screen printing bay and screen print it on and fire it in the kiln. It's really quite a quick process.
I was asking about the glass because I was going to ask you, like, do you have to find like a lead cane that would fit over the two pieces of glass? Or so you're saying you seal it first and then you use copper foil?
Yeah, you use copper foil to seal it, and then quite often I'll use wide heart lead. So you have different heart leads, so different thicknesses. So I will use a wide heart lead, which allows for the thicker glass, because if you're double plating it, it's going to be about 6 millimeters thick. So that's really quite thick as a piece of glass, so you need to have larger leads. I don't really do a lot of copper foiling. I know that copper foiling is a big thing in the States, and it's something that I do occasionally, but not very much. So I tend to use lead rather than copper foil when I make my windows up.
Have you ever made an entire piece of copper foil?
I've made a couple of little Tiffany lamps, and I've used copper foil sometimes in as part of a bigger window, but I haven't made an entire window in copper foil. It's very much an American tradition rather than a European tradition, with Tiffany and the Tiffany lamps and all of that. And I know it's a big industry in the States. The hobby market and that whole copper foil world is really quite a big world. I'm learning about it all the time as I kind of make contact with more artists in the States. I see that copper foil really does play quite a big part in a glass artist's life over there. Yeah.
Huge. Yeah, there's way more copper foil artists here than there is lead. I mean, they're here, but definitely it's not balanced at all. It's really interesting because, on your side, it's all lead artists.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we come from that tradition, that stained glass tradition. So it's using lead and glass and solder. But of course, there's a whole lot of new techniques now with screen printing. Screen printing is a big thing here in the UK. I use a studio called Proto Studios down near London. They do all of my screen printing larger projects, and I use a couple of studios in Germany. Peter's studio and Derek's studio. They are glass wizards over there. They can do so many amazing things with airbrushing, etc. So yeah, we're not restricted to just using lead and glass. There's so many different ways to get an image onto glass nowadays. That's what's exciting about it.
It is. It's always evolving. Now, you're the first Brit that I've spoken with since your queen passed.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? I know that there's a lot of different feelings about it.
Yeah, it's a big thing. I mean, it is a big thing. We have a funny kind of way of working in the UK in that we're subjects to a monarch. So yeah, we don't have a citizens charter. We're not kind of a republic as you guys are. We are subject to a king or a queen. And yeah, so it's a big thing. She's in state at the moment. Today is the 14th, as we're recording it, 14th of September. So she's lying in state in London, and a whole lot of people are processing through and staying sort of 24 hours in the rain to go and see the Queen lying in state. So it's a big thing. I am a royalist. I've met Prince Charles, shaking his hand, or King Charles as he is now. And I kind of feel that if you're going to have like mega wealthy people at the top of the tree, you may as well have a monarchy that's as forward looking and public facing as they are. They do so much, especially Prince Charles, or King Charles, I should say. He does an amazing amount for heritage crafts. I was involved with a TV program recently that went out on Sky Arts called The Prince's Master Crafters, which is celebrating heritage crafts, and it was like a 6-part series. And at the end of it, all of the contestants got to meet King Charles and present their work to him. So he's a real champion for, looking after the heritage crafts, including stained glass. So the death of the Queen is like, yeah, it's a big thing. Constitutionally, it's a big thing. We're having, it's wall-to-wall coverage on television at the moment. And it's a sort of a new era where we're now all having to get used to a King Charles being our monarch. So whether you're a royalist or whether you're not, I think you can't ignore the fact that it's a big event.
Yeah, I agree. And when can we see that show in the US?
That's a great question. I think it's being sold worldwide. We had it broadcast on, we have Sky Arts. I don't know if you get Sky in the States at all. Rupert Murdoch owns that. And I think they're selling it around the world. So eventually I think it's going to come to the States. I'll try and put it out on social media once I learn a little bit more about it. But I've had a lot of people who've said, yeah, we can't see it. A lot of people in Australia, in the States, in Latin America are saying, when can we see it? So I hope it's going to come out to them as well. It's a really interesting show. So it's a 6-parter, and there's a group of young students. Each of them have got their own skills. So there's a stonemason, there's a wood carver, there's a glass artist, and they all get to try each other's crafts. So one day they'll all do stained glass, or one day they'll all do wood carving. And it's really interesting because it's kind of promoting this whole thing about heritage crafts, and it's done in an interesting way. So I do hope you get to see it sometime soon. It's the more things that are put out on television celebrating stained glass, the better, in my mind.
I agree. When I think about Queen Elizabeth, a lot of times I think about the window that was made by David Hockney.
Yeah.
I'm going to just read a little blurb that I found online about it. It says, and this is a while back, guys, we're not even talking about anything that just happened, but David Hockney's stained glass window for Westminster Abbey, called the Queen's Window, is a vibrantly colored contemporary work located in the north transept next to other more traditional stained glass windows. I just want to pause there and say for a second, if you guys look up pictures of this, it looks so out of place next to the windows that it's next to. Okay, so the Dean of Westminster, the Very Reverend Dr. John Hall, wanted to commission something to celebrate the reign of Elizabeth II, the United Kingdom's longest reigning monarch. David Hockney, one of the most influential British artists of this reign, was asked if he would undertake the commission to design a stained glass window in a space which was then of 19th century blank glass. Within a day of being offered the commission, Hockney sent the Dean a first draft design. David Hockney had never worked in stained glass. Hockney's design depicts a country scene featuring hawthorn blossom and using his distinct color palette of yellow, red, blue, pink, orange, and greens. Hockney used an iPad to design this window and considered the iPad a natural design tool for this project because, like a stained glass window, it's backlit. The window reflects Elizabeth II's interest and delight in the countryside and is described by Hockney as a celebration. Stained glass artists and craftspeople at Barley Studio, who you mentioned earlier, created the window using traditional techniques, working with the artist to translate his vision into glass. Barley Studio is based in York. Helen Whitaker was primarily responsible for translating Hockney's design to stained glass, and she made sure to preserve the natural, non-uniform lines of nature captured by the artist in his design in the final piece. Now, there's a lot of different opinions about this. Some people are upset that David Hockney did it because he's not a stained glass artist. Some people I've heard were even upset that he designed it on an iPad, which I think is actually probably a much more common way of designing things now. And some people hated it. Where do you land on all of this?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. That's such a good question. And it's a really thorny one because I think almost all of the glass artists that I've talked to don't like it. Now, I'm good friends with Keith Barley and Helen at Barley Studios. I think they're fantastic. I think they're extremely skillful. So my heart is with them on this. But I think there's an awful lot of criticism around the window. So, I mean, we can unpack that. I'm one of the few people that I can see that is saying it's a really interesting window. Most people, especially the glass artists, say things like it doesn't fit in well with the rest of the glass. It looks like it's been designed on an iPad. It's too bright and colorful. It hasn't been the color, the light hasn't been controlled well enough. And, all of those criticisms are absolutely valid. I have no problem with people making those criticisms. I think they're right. And I think it does look as if it's been designed on an iPad and it is bright and colorful and it doesn't fit in well with the rest of the glass. So what? I think if we don't innovate and if we don't allow artists to come in from other disciplines and do their own thing with stained glass will forever remain the same. It will look like it's always looked. And I think that's the death knell of glass. I think if you look at that window as part of the body of work of David Hockney, now he does photographs, he does prints, he does photo montages, he does a whole host of things. He writes books. He's now doing stained glass. And it fits perfectly in with his body of work. It looks like a Hockney. It looks like his work. And I was so excited to see what he produced. Now, yeah, I mean, you can make lots of criticisms about it. But do you know what? Some of the most interesting work that's ever been made has fallen foul of the critics when it was first put in. I mean, I think the church commissioners were very clever. They knew exactly what they were doing. They gave Hockney a free hand. They didn't really know what they were going to get, but they got a Hockney, and it's good for business. I went down to see it. It's cost £20, which is nearly $40 to go into Westminster Abbey to see it. It's a money-making venture, and it attracts massive amounts of tourists. You got all these wonderful Japanese tourists coming in, and Europeans and all the rest of it coming in, not just to see the Hockney window, but the Hockney window is an attraction. And I think over a period of time, people will get used to it. I think it was an interesting and clever move to commission Hockney to do the work. And I want to see more artists who are not involved with glass. It may sound odd for me to say it as a glass artist, but I think that for the sake of the life of the medium, we need to bring creatives in who are completely outside the world of stained glass. I come from a very traditional upbringing. I was trained at art school. I've got a degree in stained glass. I do conservation work. I do traditional stained glass work. I'm not the one to reinvent stained glass. Maybe the people who are going to reinvent stained glass are only 10 years old, 12 years old at the moment. But if we don't offer them the chance to do it and show them exciting work as you're doing and as I'm trying to do with my work, we'll never get those new creatives coming in and reinventing glass and creating glass that we haven't even dreamed was possible. And that I think is going to ensure that glass survives, because it's not just going to survive with the hobbyists. The hobbyists are an important part, but it's not going to, do anything amazing just in the hobby market. You've got to bring painters in, and sculptors in, and graffiti artists in to do, rip the whole thing up and kind of reinvent glass. And I'm hoping to see more of that. So that's a long answer to your question about what did I think of the Hockney window. I think the Hockney window is a mixed success. I think there's a lot of things wrong with it, but I'm really glad it was done. And I want to see more experimental work. And I want to see people taking more risks. And that's the only way that glass is really going to survive, I think, when people start taking more risks.
A moment of respect for that answer. Wow, wow, wow. That was so well said. Thank you so much. I totally agree with you. I think that there's going to be some bumps in terms of how that is generated. But at the end of the day, the fact that it happened is actually a huge step for stained glass. Did you listen to David Judson's episode by chance?
No, I haven't. I've been looking through 2 or 3 of the episodes, but I haven't heard that one yet. I interviewed Tim Carey, who was working with Judson Studios for that world's largest stained glass window. So I've seen him on film, but I haven't listened to your podcast. I will listen to it.
Yeah, or anybody else that's interested in terms of, we talk a lot about bringing artists in from different mediums and having the work translated in glass. And that's a lot of what Judson Studios does. And it's a great episode about that specifically.
Yeah,
I
think that's the way forward. I think, you go to Germany, for example, the European studios, they're doing work by big scale projects from an artist who might have won a commission who's never designed a window before. And it's some amazing results. Not all of them are successful, and that's fine. We've got to accept that, to make an omelette, you're going to break some eggs and you're not always going to have success, but that's fine. The important thing is to do that, is to go through the process of bringing in new people and taking risks. So yeah, I'll definitely listen to the Judson podcast.
Yeah. To make an omelet, you gotta break some eggs. I've never heard that before. That's yes. Very, very true. If you don't mind, I'd like to get a little bit more personal now. I want to
For
circle
sure.
back. On your YouTube, like I mentioned earlier, you have your videos broken up into different categories. And one of the categories is your road to recovery vlog. Now, recently, June 9th in 2022, you made your first post about it. You said, I've been diagnosed with bowel cancer and I will need to have an operation to remove it later this month. Now, when you posted that, my heart, it just like went out to you and your loved ones. I'll cry right now just thinking about it. When I saw that post, I can't imagine how scary that was for you all. Did you have an inkling that something was wrong, was happening, or did it just completely come out of the blue for you?
It really came out of a clear blue sky. I had was given a test. Here in the UK, you get given a test at certain times in your life, and I was asked to send in a test sample, and they said, "Okay, come in. We need to do a colonoscopy, which is basically a camera." And they found it there at that time, and they said, "Look, I'm sorry, you know, I'm looking at a cancer, a tumor in your stomach." So I kind of learned on the operating theater that I had cancer. So yeah, it came out of a clear blue sky with no symptoms. And I kind of knew that as I say, I was due to go to the Corning Glass Museum and take part in a conference, and I was really looking forward to meeting a whole lot of glass artists from the States that I'd met online, and I was going to meet them in person. And I felt that I had to make a video to just say, look guys, I'm really sorry, my life has just taken a left turn, like a sharp left turn, and I can't, you know, I won't be making videos for a while, and I won't be able to sort of travel. So I felt I kind of wanted to just maintain contact. I'm all about the creative community, as you are. And I think this creative community is a wonderful thing. And I think keeping the lines of communication open is really important. And, you know, being upfront and telling people situations, even if it's a personal situation, I kind of felt that I wanted to share that because I wasn't quite sure what the outcome would be. You know, in all honesty, I didn't know whether I was going to have months of chemotherapy or whatever. So fortunately, they took the tumor out, and I'm back right as rain. I'm kind of like 100% back in the studio again, making videos and making stained glass windows. So I'm immensely grateful to our health service, our NHS here in the UK, that they were proactive. They contacted me, and they found something that I didn't know I had. So I'll be forever grateful to them for that.
And now, when they first told you that there was a tumor, did you know, did they say, we don't know how serious it is yet, we don't know if you're going to make it through this? Was there that question mark at the beginning?
They said basically I'd had it for about a year. It was quite large, and basically they had to act right away, and they didn't know whether it had spread. And they were being honest and saying that, you know, we can see it, but we don't know whether it's spread to your lymph nodes and whether it's metastasized, which is basically a fancy word for basically saying it's spread. So I was taken in for an operation, and once the tumor is removed, then they have a look at it and they decide, you know, whether it's spread or not. Fortunately for me, it hadn't spread to my lymph nodes. So they feel as if they've got the whole thing out. And I'm still under treatment. I mean, I have CT scans and a blood test every 6 months, because with bowel cancer, it's, you know, it comes back. Sometimes it comes back, and they're looking for markers that would suggest that it might be coming back. So I'm pretty calm about it. If it comes back, it comes back. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of experience of family members with cancer. My wife had breast cancer. My dad died of pancreatic cancer. My mum died of ovarian cancer. So it's like I've seen it up personal and close. I'm not afraid of it. I accept that it's just that sometimes happens with people. I don't see any reason why I shouldn't get it. And so when I was given the news, it was like, okay, it's my turn now. And I was quite calm about it, and I didn't rock my world in the sense that I wasn't blown over by it. I kind of accepted that it was possibly always on the cards, since I've been surrounded by family members who've had it. So I think there's probably a genetic component in my family that means that I'm more likely to get it. My youngest brother's just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So yeah, we've got a lot of it in our family, unfortunately. It doesn't mean that you have to kind of live under the shadow of it. You kind of live despite it, and when you get done the things that you want to do. That's why I want to keep making podcasts and making videos and making glass and doing as much as I can and reaching out to the community for as long as I can. None of us know how long we've got, so I'm quite kind of realistic about it, and accept that that's just the way it is, and make the most of what you can. So that's kind of my philosophy, really.
Your calm in that moment and sort of facing it, was that a surprise to you? Did you expect to be that calm, or had you? Does that align with how you normally react?
I think so. I kind of. They often say that like a good marriage is a mixture of two different types of personalities. My wife is much more dramatic and emotional, and I'm the calm one. so when I get given news, I kind of like go, okay, and kind of process it in a calm way. And when I was told it, yeah, I kind of accepted it in a calm way. So, I mean, what I was amazed by, and genuinely amazed and really touched by, was the number of people that reached out to me and contacted me and said, look, I've been through this, Derek, or my wife has been through this, or my husband's been through this. We've survived, you've got this. And it really, really helped. This community, this creative community that we're all part of, is so, so important. And I felt lifted up. And it wasn't just the creative community. It was obviously friends and family members and friends that I, just the outpouring of support. I think you see the best in people. If you're going through a tough time, you tend to see the best in people, and that's very moving. And I don't forget that, and I'll never forget that part of it. The fact that people went out of their way, and they would send books, and they would send things that said, "Look, this helped me going through my treatment," and it was just really, really. I felt really lifted up by it. So, yeah. That there's lots of positives that can come from these things, and it's right to say that you can actually learn and learn good things from these bad experiences, and I think you can.
Yeah, I agree. For our listeners, I know in your case you didn't have any warning signs, and I know now that you're much more educated on all of this than I would be. But for our listeners, are there any warning signs that they should be looking for, or preemptive measures or tests that you would suggest?
For sure, yeah. I mean, if you can have what's called a colonoscopy, which is basically a camera which goes up, your bottom. If that is the best way to discover if you've got any problems, any polyps and things like that. And I know in the States that tends to happen from the age of about 45. Here in the UK, it's later. It's usually about 55 or 60. So if you can have those regularly, don't sleep on that. Get them done. If you have the symptoms to be aware of is change in your bowel habits. So, if your bowel habits change, not just for 1 day or 2 days, you might just have had something bad to eat. But if that's going to last for a couple of weeks, that's a warning sign, maybe that there's something going on in your, in your stomach that you need to have a look at. Obviously, things like blood in your poo is a big possibility as well. So just to be, and I think we're more willing to talk about our health nowadays. I think in the UK we had a YouTuber and a social media, the Bowel Babe, who died recently, and she had millions of followers, and she really kind of demystified a lot of bowel cancer and talked about poo and talked about all of these things that it's absolutely natural. It's all part of all of our lives. We tend to kind of shy away from these things, but if we can just be honest and open and say, look, these things are important, look for those kind of warning signs, change in bowel habits, blood in your poo, and get yourself tested every 3 years, ideally. Those are the things to be aware of, because actually it's quite a big killer, bowel cancer. It does get a lot of us, unfortunately. and it's to do with lifestyle, it's to do with genetics, it's to do with lots of different things. And it might just be bad luck as well, as much as anything, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And on June 25th, your second vlog, you said it was very early in the morning. And you said that one of the side effects that you were experiencing was that you had insomnia. And that it was fine because you were enjoying this like magical time in the morning before anybody else woke up. But how is that now for you? Are you still having a hard time sleeping?
No, it's gone back to normal, thank goodness. Yeah, I mean, I certainly found that coming home for the first few weeks, my rhythms were all out, and I was waking up very, very early in the morning, or sometimes really not sleeping for, maybe waking up at 3 in the morning or 2 in the morning and not going back to sleep. And we live out in the country. My studio is next to the house, and we're in a little village. And so there's you hear the sheep in the morning, you hear all the birds in the morning. So you can't ignore it. And so I would get up and I would go into the garden, and it was really lovely. And I decided one morning just to make a little vlog video just to say how fantastic it is to be up at that time in the morning. And it really does kind of I don't know about you, but I love early in the morning. You kind of feel you got a head start on the day. The whole day is ahead of you. And especially if the family is asleep, you kind of feel as if you've got this little moment to yourself. And that was really helpful for me to do that and to reconnect with nature. And I was also very, very grateful that I could do it, that I felt that I was getting better and that I had been given more time. So all of those things helped me in my recovery,
Yeah, definitely. In vlog number 4, which you made on July 6th. In vlog number 5 on July 11th, it was you and Sue doing some yoga. Are you still practicing?
Yeah, we've been doing it for about 4 years. It's fantastic. My wife used to do yoga classes, and then she said, "Oh, Derek, why don't you come along?" And I said, "I'm not coming along to a bloody yoga class, getting dressed up in blooming lycra. It's not my thing." But eventually I got to the point where I still go out fitting windows, and I go up and down scaffolding and ladders and things, and my knees were starting to hurt and my hips were starting to hurt, and I thought I'm going to have to do something. So I started doing yoga, and it's basically a glorified stretching regime that we do, and we try and do it maybe 4 or 5 times a week. And it's just for sort of half an hour, 40 minutes. And it's absolutely fantastic at just keeping yourself supple. And making stained glass windows is quite sedentary, isn't it? I mean, it's like doing jigsaw puzzles for a living. You're just standing at a bench assembling glass. And so you're not really using a lot of strength. And if you're designing, you're sitting down. So it's quite sedentary. So I think exercise is important of some sort, and certainly stretching for me has been something that I've really enjoyed doing. And it's also a great mindset. It sets you up for the day because you just put the music on and you get the mats out, and you kind of it's a great start to the day. I'd recommend it for people, especially for anxiety. If you're anxious, or if you suffer from bad joints, those kind of things, it's such a good thing to do, and it's a very low impact thing, so it's something that you can do at any age.
It's so true. And there's so many modifications. You can do it from your chair. Like, you don't even have to get up in order to enjoy yoga. And then there's much more advanced, and you can get more and more. It's kind of like conservation in a way, where it's like, once you open the yoga book, like, you could just keep going, because you can dive into the history of yoga and yogic philosophy. And yeah, sure. I love that you guys were doing that. That's amazing.
And do you do yoga? Do you practice yoga yourself?
I do, yeah. I've been practicing for a long time. Yeah, I used to teach yoga also.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
So do you do this every morning? What's your regime? How do you do it?
No, I don't do it every day. I should. I don't. I really enjoy power yoga. I really enjoy hot yoga. So recently I've been working with more like resistance training. I got a personal trainer. I've been doing more weights. And so I've been doing like the trainer 2 days a week, and then hot yoga like one day in between, just kind of like loosen everything up and stretch everything out. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. But it's, if you would have asked me like 5 years ago, my answer would be different. Like I've had this like really long journey with yoga where it's sort of what I need from it has evolved. I lived in an ashram for a while in Central California called the Shivananda Yoga Farm, if that sounds familiar to anybody. Yeah, I love yoga. Yoga's everything. It really is. It's like whatever you need it to be. Yeah.
Wow. I'm talking to an expert. That's wonderful.
No.
It's such. I mean, I have a very limited understanding of it, and I know that it's as you say, it's a big topic, and there's a spiritual component to it as well. I kind of see it as a way of exercising, as a way of stretching, and I don't really do any resistance. I need to do more sort of resistance yoga or resistance exercises because I'm sort of at the point in my life where I need to kind of do that. So I might mix it up a little bit as well and change things over a period of time and start using maybe a little bit more weights and things like that. But it's just such a nice thing. Once you kind of incorporate it into your life, it just becomes something that you look forward to and something that you want to do. It's like having breakfast. You kind of look forward to it. That's the start of your day.
Yeah, it's a wonderful start to your day. And you don't have to get into you can be super Western about it. You don't have to get into any of the Hindu, nothing. You don't have to learn any Sanskrit. You could just do some stretches that have been making bodies happy for thousands of years. Okay, Derek, so it is time for me to ask you the final 3 questions of the interview. My first question is, who is your favorite artist? Not stained glass.
Oh, that's an easy one. I shouldn't really have one favorite artist, but I do. An American artist called Robert Rauschenberg. I absolutely adore him. He's dead now, but he was a abstract expressionist or a pop art artist, and he did a lot of really interesting things with screen printing, and that was so inspirational for me because I could see that in glass. And I love the fact that he experimented with lots of different techniques. He experimented with cardboard. He did things called combines where he'd pull a whole lot of rubbish out of a skip, and make it into art. And Robert Rauschenberg, my all-time favorite artist.
I love that you didn't have to think about it. That's amazing.
I go on about him all the time. Unfortunately, that's the thing. I talk about Robert. I've got a library in the house, and it's got about 7 or 8 books on Robert Rauschenberg, and he's fabulous.
Do you have any of his pieces?
No, I wish. I went to one of his shows in London, but I can't afford that kind of money. Mm-hmm. I'll just buy his books. I'll buy his books.
Yeah. Who is your favorite stained glass artist, or somebody that you just want to kind of give a nod to and acknowledge?
Oh, again, another great question. I mean, one of my all-time favorites is Marc Chagall. He came late to stained glass. He was in his mid-70s. He was a painter, and he came to stained glass late in life, and he started this whole new career and really created a body of work which is so gorgeous. And there's a museum in Nice in the south of France, which is all of his work, and it's got his paintings and his stained glass. And I've been down there a couple of times. I could just live there. It's just fabulous. I went to Israel a few years ago now to the Hadass Medical Center just outside Jerusalem, where he's got the 12 tribes of Israel, and that's 12 windows, all different colors, like a green window next to a red window next to a blue window, and just brilliant. And it's the painter's eye. It was what we were talking about earlier about bringing creatives in who've never done stained glass before. They start using glass in interesting ways that normally glass artists don't work with. So Marc Chagall, an absolute all-time favorite. From contemporary artists, I love Martin Donlin, who's a UK artist, Graham Jones, Brian Clarke, three glass artists who are doing really interesting new work. There's a lot of interesting glass artists on social media.
And then the final question, and we did touch on this a little bit, but I'm going to ask you again, what are your 5 to 10 year goals?
Oh, right. My 5 to 10 year goals is to continue trying to make the best art glass that I can, to push myself into new territories, to find exciting new commissions. I like doing large scale commissions. I do quite a lot of church work, but I do work for for public buildings, theatres, shopping centres, that kind of thing. I want to do more of that because I think getting your teeth into a really big commission is really interesting. But a new goal, and it's something that we touched on earlier on in the conversation, is to develop my footprint in social media and to get better at it, and to try and put as much useful information out into social media as I can. So my goal really for the next 5 years is to grow my YouTube channel and to grow my Instagram and Facebook followers, to kind of develop the, not in any way to be egotistical, but just to develop that community and to put out useful information that hopefully will be there for this next generation of glass artists that we're all really keen to see.
Well, gosh, we've been talking for so long. I feel like I could just keep going and going. I still have more questions, but I just want you to know you are such an asset to our community. A word I can never say, community. I feel like I can never say that word. And I'm so grateful you shared your journey with us today. I can't wait to see what's next for you, but I know I can count on you sharing it with us and updating us. And I am subscribed to your YouTube channel. I subscribed today, and I urge all of our listeners to subscribe as well. What is your YouTube channel? Where can we find you?
If you search for Derek Hunt Artist, you'll find me across Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Just type in Derek Hunt Artist and you'll find me. Okay, great. Oh my gosh. Well, have a wonderful and productive day in the studio today. Actually, no, have a wonderful and productive day in the studio tomorrow, because I know that it is actually 8 p.m. where you are. And I'll talk to you really soon. Oh, I've loved this. Thank you so much, Siobhan, for inviting me onto your podcast. It's been a blast. You're welcome back anytime. To see more of Derek's work, his Instagram is at Derek Hunt Artist. That's DerekHuntartist. And mine is at Runa Glassworks. For the Cracked Patreon page members, Derek is offering a music playlist to listen to while you work. You'll find a link to that on the Patreon page. Next week's guest is Kelsey McNair of Soft Shapes. Thank you all for listening and supporting and just all around being the best. Till next time, bye.